Cheers.
Is this working? Is it? Okay, so it is working. Okay, good. Ja, online, precis. Här är det. Nej, men jag pratar tillräckligt högt, det är lugnt. Good morning. Good morning, everyone. Very good to see a full room for this morning's session, interesting session entitled Water Cooperation. My name is Karin Gardes. I'm the Chief Operating Officer at SIWI and also the Director for the International Center for Water Cooperation, the ICWC. That is a UNESCO Category 2 center that SIWI has the honor of hosting within its premises. As you probably heard in the opening ceremony also yesterday, and in, I am convinced, most of the sessions you attended yesterday, there is a red thread running through all of this, which really is around how do we work together in the field of water, water management, water cooperation. And this is precisely what we will dig much more into in today's session. Water is a finite resource, yet it is almost never treated as such. So there is competition around water and water resources. And as long as there is a competition or a ground for competition, there is the potential also for a lot of tension, potentially even conflict around water. And that's really where we, as CWE and within ICWC, we want to take the narrative from that of a tension or a potential conflict around resources to also say that it is a breeding ground for cooperation around water. Because around water resources, there is no win-lose situation. There are only win-win or lose-lose situations. And that's where we want to try to shift that narrative in going that, okay, if there is a shared water resources and the need for water to be indeed competed around, let's try to find the ways and means to cooperate. We will today hear how this water cooperation can happen at different scales. And we will also hear specifically examples from Africa and also from Pakistan. So I'm very, very excited at today's session that is also forming an important part of the work that we at CWE, within the premises of our International Center for Water Cooperation, want to develop and want to take forward, and also offer some concrete solutions and analysis on what it would take to really cooperate around water resources. So it's really a great, great pleasure to see so many of you in this room. And without further ado, I will give the floor to my colleague Håkan Tropp, who will facilitate today's discussion. Håkan, over to you. And you don't need this because you have the small one. You are equipped.
Yeah. Thanks a lot, Tori, for this introduction. And I think we all know in this room, I'm sure you probably know much more than myself, that water tensions are on the rise. I mean, what we're seeing is very steep increases in the demand for water by multiple sectors. Studies and forecasts indicate that by 2050, the demand for water may raise as much as 55%. Demands coming strongly from the manufacturing sector, energy sectors, for example. And we do know that demand for water for agriculture will, of course, remain very high. We're also witnessing shifting lifestyles. Urbanization is going on very rapidly in many countries, particularly on the African continent, but of course also parts of the Asian continent. Economic development is accelerating, and I think the paradox with that, of course, is that that also drives more demand for water, more uses of water. It also drives water pollution issues, for example. So we can really see that there is a range of drivers that drives the increased demand and use of water. We're also seeing very strong shifts when it comes to the supply of water. So it's not only demand that is shifting, it's also the supply. And this is, of course, playing out very differently in different parts of the world. And sometimes it gets wetter, sometimes it gets drier. Actually, what many countries are witnessing is both. It's both protracted droughts and intensification of floodings, for example. So this seems to be a parallel phenomenon in many countries. So how do we then deal with this as a society? And I think this is actually what we will be focusing on in this, this event here. And where we really strongly think that water is a strong medium for actually generating cooperation. We all know that conflicts are lurking around, and, but we're also seeing a lot of actions when it comes to actually promoting cooperation. And this is actually what we'll be hearing today. So this will be presented from working with cooperation at different scales. And we have a very exciting panel here today, and also with a very good geographical representation. We also have the Honorable Minister of South Africa, Mr. Senzo Mchunu, and he will speak a bit later and also make some reflections on the South African experience when it comes to water cooperation. I think with this, I would very much like to introduce the first speaker. It's Engineer Evans Kaseke, working as a program manager at the Zambezi River Commission, ZAMCOM. And obviously, we will hear a cooperation story, and I think indeed a very successful one when it comes to working on shared waters between countries. Please, the floor is yours.
There, the computer.
Yes. Okay. Thank you. Good morning. And I first would like to recognize the Minister of Water from South Africa. Thank you so for coming over. My principals, the directors of various departments in the ministries in Southern Africa who are here, as well as our colleagues from SIWI and every other person who is here. And I'm going to share with you over a very short period, about 10 minutes, perspectives from the Zambezi Watercourse on how water cooperation is actually fostering sustainable water governance in the Zambezi Watercourse. What is now fostering cooperation in the Zambezi Watercourse, there is a shared vision. And this shared vision was actually agreed on by the 8 riparian states, the ones that which are represented by their flags, which are the republics of Angola, Republic of Botswana, Malawi, Mozambique, Namibia, United Republic of Tanzania, Zambia, and Zimbabwe. These 8 countries, under the auspices of SADC, came together and agreed on a vision for the watercourse, which is to enable and which is equitable and reasonable utilization of water for social and environmental justice, regional integration, and economic benefit for present and future generations. And this vision was also influential in the development of a mission or the objective, which is in the ZAMCOM agreement of 2004. Also, to foster that cooperation, there is an enabling legal environment. And the key frameworks that are inherent to that legal framework include, as a first, the revised protocol on shared watercourses of the year 2000, also under the auspices of SADC. And then there is the ZAMCOM, in the ZAMCOM agreement, also that is a key framework that governs cooperation in the Zambezi Watercourse Commission. And all these two are actually founded on the UN Convention on the non-navigational uses of international watercourses. So these are the 3 critical frameworks that actually influence the cooperation over water in the Zambezi. And to drive through the processes and activities, in the Zambezi Watercourse, there is the governance structure. I'll just point out two very important levels. Right at the top is the Council of Ministers. This is the highest decision-making body for ZAMCOM. And right at the bottom, you can see the national stakeholder coordination committees. These are the stakeholders, you know, at the ground level, at various levels within each one of the countries. So there's also the basin-wide stakeholder coordination committee, where representatives from the national committees actually meet to crystallize whatever recommendations would have been made at the lowest levels, and they go through the structures right up to the Council of Ministers for their review and for their consideration and appropriate decision. Right, within ZAMCOM, there are also functions that were actually also agreed on. These are very long-term functions. If I could just point out the first one, collect, evaluate, and disseminate all data and information. This is critical because this is where critical information is derived from, that influence that is actually input into informed decision-making processes. Then also there are advisory roles, you know, that are articulated within some of these functions of ZAMCOM. If there are any disputes, any discomforts that are expressed by council, by some member states or groups, they are actually settled within this framework of the functions of ZAMCOM. And just to take you through a critical characteristic of the Zambezi Watercourse, if we look at the very last bullet, there are significant variations among the countries, that is the riparian states, in terms of economic status, population sizes, the geographical sizes of the countries, water availability, institutional capacities, and also what we have to remember within that context, we've got English-speaking African countries, we've got Portuguese-speaking African countries, and they all have to be brought together through the frameworks that I have actually articulated, because irrespective of where they came from, the Portuguese background or the English background, they all came together, you know, recognizing those differences or those variations, but the frameworks and the vision, they actually have the effect of bringing everybody together. Because why were they brought together? These are some of the challenges that were, through a multi-sectoral stakeholder consultative process, these were actually identified by the stakeholders in the Zambezi Watercourse, and these are actually recognized officially as key challenges pertaining to cooperative management of water within the Zambezi. And in this case, just to highlight one which I think some of you are quite aware of. If we go to bullet number 4, growing energy deficit, hydropower due to droughts. This is a key problem, a key challenge in the Zambezi Watercourse. I think from around 2019, 2018, there has been quite a severe drought which has been experienced throughout the Zambezi Watercourse. And I think some of you are aware of the situation that the Kariba Dam was in, whereby it was not able to sustain, you know, power generation to power the industries, the irrigation systems within some of the countries like Zimbabwe and Zambia. So these are the key challenges that were actually that are recognized officially, and these are broad in nature. And these also, you know, guide partnerships on how the kind of actions that they can take with respect to these challenges. Well, given the challenges, there's also a myriad of opportunities on how responses could be made with the objective of tackling those challenges. But the key objective, having, you know, the vision right at the fore, the cooperation has got to be sustained, you know, through those governance systems. If I could just highlight a key opportunity, bullet number 3, departure from unilateral action that may undermine the development of one country by another to coordination, collaboration, and joint programming. This is a key opportunity within the Zambezi Watercourse. And the Zambezi Watercourse, with respect to that, a key opportunity, they've also developed, you know, cooperative instruments of cooperation for the basin or the watercourse. And in response to some of those challenges, these are some of the key activities that have been that were agreed on by all the countries. And in this case, if I could just touch on the first bullet, partnerships for cooperation, national stakeholder committees, the international cooperating partners, strategic partnerships. This is a major thrust that the watercourse actually has adopted. And in talking to that, the way business is done in SADC is also within the Zambezi watercourse. There is a very strong stakeholder consultative process, which is at the core of those partnerships. And a very good example, I think, if our colleagues from the bank, African Development Bank, were here, they would actually talk to you about a process that we are actually working on within the Zambezi watercourse to develop a climate smart investment initiative, you know, for this, all the 8 riparian states. And where in some regions, regional economic blocks, where they've taken 2-5 years to come up with, you know, just an agreed plan of how it's going to be done. In the Zambezi, they actually took just about 6 months. Then also water resources management. We've got an information system, water information system, and there's a portal there where all the countries, you know, deposit their information, and information is shared. Then there's the strategic plan. This is actually a major instrument of transboundary cooperation, which is guiding development in the Zambezi watercourse. I will not really touch this one since I've got 1 minute left. Foreseen benefits of cooperation, peace dividends, poverty reduction, increased regional economic benefits, regional approaches enabling optimal planning, development and agreement of joint investment ventures, and poverty reduction, increased regional economic cooperation. These are some of the foreseen benefits that are actually acknowledged by the riparian states and stakeholders within the Zambezi watercourse. I think having said that, I should be going to the with these foreseen benefits. This is the end of my presentation.
Thank you very much, Engineer Kaseke. Indeed, very interesting. I'm looking at the clock here, so we are already a little bit behind. So So let's park questions till the panel discussion. I think you made a lot of good points. I think here, what are the benefits of cooperation? I think that's an important one. So I think that's something we can get back to and discuss. Something I reacted to was also and what you're experiencing now around the Zambezi Basin, these extreme shifts when it comes to spatial and temporal variability of rainfall. So how does this type of cooperation mechanism respond to that type of challenge? Are provisions sufficient, or would there be kind of new rounds of negotiations, and how would SAMCOM deal with that from an institutional point of view? So, but let's park these questions and we'll come back to it. I will now introduce Tumaini Mwamwala. I probably said that completely wrongly. Excuse me. And she's working with the Ministry of Water and Irrigation in Tanzania. And I think we will hear a very interesting case when it comes to water cooperation more at the national level, but of course also connecting to different scales. Please.
Do we have the World Water Week technician here? Please go ahead.
Okay, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm also recognizing His Honorable Minister from South Africa and other dignitaries and the SIWI staff here. My name is Tumaini Mwamwala. I work with Ministry of Water in Tanzania. I'll be here presenting a short presentation on what Tanzania have been benefiting through transboundary water cooperation.
I think we need help between the presentations. I think you can.
Okay, where do I press here?
The next speakers. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so Tanzania, as we know, is one of the East African countries, and it is bordering with those countries I've shown in my presentation: Kenya, Uganda, Rwanda, Burundi, Democratic Republic of Congo, Zambia, Malawi, Mozambique, and also Indian Ocean. Actually, Tanzania, we are cooperating with almost 16 countries on transboundary water management. Other countries are Angola, Botswana, Ethiopia, Egypt, Namibia, Sudan, South Sudan, and Zimbabwe. Actually, we have 11 international water bodies that we are sharing with other riparian nations. And this includes the 3 Great Lakes, which is Victoria, Tanganyika, and Nyasa, and other lakes like Chalajipe and big rivers, Kagera, Mara, Pangani, Umba, Ruvuma, and Songwe. By seeing this map, Tanzania, we are managing our water in transboundary basins, and we have 9 basins. And out of those 9 basins, 7 basins are transboundary basins. So you can see how it's important for Tanzania to do transboundary water cooperation, because most of our waters are transboundary that we are sharing with other countries. When we want to abstract, as we all know that when you want to abstract large amount of water, we need to be part of agreements, protocols, and MOUs. So Tanzania is part of these protocols and MOUs. We are part of the Nile Cooperative Agreement frameworks that we have signed and we have ratified. And also we are part of the agreement between Tanzania and Republic of Mozambique on the establishment of the Joint Water Commission for the Rovuma River. And also we are part of the establishment of the Zamcom Commission, and also we are part of the Convention of the Sustainable Management of the Lake Tanganyika, and also the Protocol on the Sustainable Development of the Lake Victoria Basin. And also we have signed a lot of MOUs. We have MOUs with Kenya for the management of the Mara River. We also have an MOU with DR Congo for the establishment of the Rukuga Barrage. And also we have MOUs with Uganda and other countries. So we are signing MOUs by bilaterals for implementing water resource management. Also, we all know that if you want to achieve transboundary cooperation, we cannot achieve if we do not have the capacity to establish joint management mechanism, which this includes the regular formal communication, coordinated water management plans, and regular exchange of data and information. So by doing that, Tanzania, we are part of these regional organizations. We are part of Lake Victoria Basin Commission. We are part of Nile Basin Initiative. We are part of Nile Equatorial Subsidiary Action Program. We are part of Lake Tanganyika Authority. We are part of Zambezi River Basin Commission. We are part of Joint Rovuma River Basin Commission and also Songwe River Basin Commission. So you can see we have a lot of these regional organizations, and we are also fulfilling our obligations because we know what are we benefiting from these regional organizations. And also Tanzania is also having bilateral cooperation between two countries. And we are implementing water cooperation activities through the JPC, Joint Permanent Commissions. For example, we are doing Joint Permanent Commission with DR Congo, with Kenya, with Uganda, Burundi, Malawi, and other countries that we are sharing water resources. And also, through this signing agreement and MOUs, we are getting a lot of benefit in many ways, including establishment and implementation of water and environmental projects, water resource management and development projects, capacity building projects. Also, we get employment in these transboundary organizations. Also, we get financial attractions. If you have signed MOU with other countries, you can also easily get funds to implement this project, and also peace and harmony with our neighbor countries. An example of few projects that our country have been benefiting from these organizations. We are now implementing the regional Rusumo Fall hydroelectrical project, which is between Tanzania, Burundi, and Rwanda. Tanzania is going to get 27 megawatt from this project, and this megawatt is going to help the communities at Ngara. And also through implementing this project, we have improved some level. We have been doing some livelihood activities in Ngara district. We have built hospitals and schools at that area. And also through Nile Basin Initiative, we have some hydromet station project that we are implementing. We've managed to construct 9 hydromet stations in Kagera River, Mara River, and other small rivers which are entering the Lake Victoria. And also we have a lot of capacity building trainings that our staff in the ministry and other colleagues in Tanzania that have benefited from this cooperation. And also through SADC, we have this hydromet station also. And also we are now implementing the Songwe River Basin project, which we are expecting to build a dam, which is going to regulate the Songwe River, which is the boundary between Tanzania and Malawi. There are a lot of projects, so because of the time, I'll just mention those few. Also, we have the project in Kagera River, where we have implemented a lot of livelihood activities in Tanzania. And also through this bilateral cooperation, we have managed to form a transboundary water use association. This is between Tanzania and Kenya, where communities from Tanzania in the districts which are within the Mara River, and the communities which are at the which are within Mara River in Kenya, they meet and discuss things on the how to sustain the Mara River, because they are also benefiting from that river. And also we have a Transboundary Wetland Management Committee for Sango Bay. This is between Tanzania and Uganda. So we have managed to implement few activities. We have bee honey projects, and also through the MOU between Tanzania and DR Congo, we are soliciting funds to construct the Rukuga barrage so that we regulate the water flowing from the Lake Tanganyika. So those are some few benefits that Tanzania is getting from Transboundary Water Cooperation. And also we have we normally prepare the reports to show to stakeholders in Tanzania that how much our country is benefiting from these initiatives, so that this helps us to be in a position to fulfill our contributions in these organizations. Despite those small challenges that we are getting from this cooperation, but for us, we think we are getting more benefits through cooperation. With these few slides, I thank you very much for listening to me.
Thanks a lot, Madam Mamuyala. I think indeed, once again, a very strong case on the benefits of cooperation. It very much outweighs the challenges. Let's continue and go more into from the national more down to the local context, and how does water cooperation play out there? And of course also linking to national context, and perhaps even how can, for example, local stakeholders also have some type of impact when it comes to transboundary water issues. I would like to introduce Madam Simi Kamal. She's the CEO of Hisar Foundation in Pakistan. Please, the floor is yours.
Stick it here would be great. Let's stick it here. Hi, can you hear me? Yes. Okay. Before I go on, I'd just like to put something in context. So I have worked with the government on a huge grant fund, several $100 million that worked on giving grants for water systems. I worked on transboundary areas, all the Track 2 dialogues with India. I worked in the region as part of Global Water Partnership think tank, and then also developed a lot of solutions within Pakistan. So I'm going to be talking a little bit about how we move from national to local level. It's very easy to start a conflict at the national level, but it's very difficult to then manage it. And I've seen in my career that if one person is perpetrating conflict, there will be 10 others who will try to do cooperation. But usually the people who are perpetrating the conflict are very powerful, and the others think they are powerless, but actually they are not. And then I will show you some examples of how some of that was done. So just a little bit of water resources in our country. Many of you know about the famous Indus Waters Treaty with India that I certainly believe has saved many wars with India. And in the 1960s, there was a huge irrigation system expansion and the Green Revolution, so that in Pakistan now we have the largest contiguous irrigation system in the world. Then in the 80s and 90s, there was a within the country, there was opposition to dams. And a lot of the smaller provinces and people living on the outside of the irrigation system felt that the system that was developing wasn't fair, and that corrections had to be done. And in 1991, we had a water accord amongst the 4 provinces of Pakistan. We also have some territories, and we have a capital territory, but largely this 1991 water accord tried to deal with the internal conflicts within the country. So this is just to give you an idea The reds and the browns are all the new link canals and the new canals that were built as part of the agreement between India and Pakistan that was brokered by the World Bank. Okay, here you see a stylized, a mental map of the Indus Basin irrigation system. It's absolutely huge. And so obviously managing this would lead, you can understand, would lead to many conflicts. Okay, now here are the 4 provinces. You can see them in colors, and then we have Gilgit-Baltistan and Azad Kashmir. So what was this water accord of 1991? We have 114 million acre feet per year. Many of you may not know what an acre foot is. You know, when we were colonized by the British, they came up with these wonderful ideas, okay, of measurements that still hang around. So 1 acre foot is when you have an acre of land and you fill it with 1 foot of water. That is an acre foot of water, because this was a measure for agricultural land. And it still stays there. Even I think in acre feet. It's hard to think in millions of gallons. And then we thought that there were 3 million acre feet, which were the ungauged canals that were not part of the actual system. And it varied from year to year and is normally less than 117. It's gone down to as little as 93, and sometimes it's gone up in floods. It goes up 144 or more. And of course, we have 50 million acre feet of groundwater underneath our largest province, which is not part of this accord. This is just for surface water. So this is how it's divided amongst the provinces, and the downstream province has always been clamoring for environmental flows because the river has dried up beyond the last barrage. Now, this is important to understand that in Pakistan, land ownership is proxy to water rights. In the opening session yesterday, this was mentioned by the speaker from University of Amsterdam. If you own land, you have a right to water. So for all landless people, who work on other people's land, or people living in squatter settlements, there's no right to water, and we've never worked this out. And few women own agricultural lands, and even if they do, they don't control. So women don't have water rights, even though they are the managers of water at so many different levels. And so the right to water of marginalized people, people without land, women, it's all very ill-defined. Then I'm going to talk to you about local government, because local government all over the world is seen as the repository of self-government. So people govern themselves. I think in your country too, you must have some kind of local government. It is the lowest tier. It's based on, in Pakistan, based on districts. And then districts have lower divisions called tehsils, talukas, union councils, and villages. So there has been a very interesting history in Pakistan. Every time we have a military government, they set up local government. And every time there is a democratically elected government, they do away with local governments because the guys in parliament want to control the funds. Okay, so this has been, unfortunately, a very interesting cycle in my country. So some kind of local government or local presses are in place right now, but it cannot be said that they are fully functioning. When the floods came to Pakistan, the floods have been there for 2 months. The international media has only just picked it up. If we had a functional local government, a lot of loss of life and property could have been saved, people could have been taken to say, there could have been evacuation. A lot of other things could have happened, and we are now really feeling the lack of not having a functional local governments. Now, citizens are most concerned about basic service delivery, okay? And in a study of which I was a part, I think it was this study, which was done sometime in 2012, everybody assumed that people would be most concerned about, at that time, you know, the terrorism and the law and order, but no. Their major concern was that they want proper services, water being on the top of the list. So there's a mismatch between citizens' perception and government, and also the international system that we are part of. So they all have very different perceptions about what's important and what needs to, and that is a real problem in solving issues. Sorry, I need to go this way. Okay, so now I'm going to focus on one province, my province, which is in the south of the country, which is downstream, and gets very little water and gets too much water as now. So these are all the districts, and almost all except Tharparkar is now flooded, including my city, Karachi. So I'm going to give you a rural example, an urban example, and an example where women have supported other women and how they have cooperated with each other. So this is an example of cooperation between local communities and NGOs. As I said earlier, mostly we don't have a functioning local government. So when there is a vacuum, other people come in. They find ways to cooperate. This is what I wanted to say, that you have the problem creators and you have the problem solvers. And the problem solvers come in. This is what happened. So this is about construction of water storage tanks at household, community, and village levels. You have a very dry area that gets rain maybe once every 2 or 3 years, sometimes only once in 5 years. How do people survive there? It's a thriving culture. Some part of it is in India as well. It's a continuation of the Thar Desert. So this had other as well, which was shrubs and tree plantation, etc., etc. But the main thing that I want to tell you about is that these water tanks were made at 3 levels. The government had no such plans. This is what people came up with. And this is what NGOs and people work together, local people work together. So you have them at 3 levels, big ponds, medium ponds, and tiny ponds in people's homes. This is what it looked like before. This is when it was constructed. And this is what it looks like after one rain. And it has the capacity of 1 million liters. And this water can stay for 6 months. And this is for 90 to 100 households. So first people take water from this big pond. Then they take it from the intermediate pond. And then they have these households. This is all underground. And these little things are there for aeration. And also literally they put a lock on it. Water is treasure. It's locked up. And then when all the other surface ponds are used up, then they open this at the end. In fact, in this area, if somebody talks about a marriage, they say, oh, we can't do the marriage ceremony until we have saved enough water in these tanks. So only then, you know that. It's from your part of the world as well. Okay, so this is what, you see the lock? See that little thing where the lock is put? Okay. So this told us that you could find a low-cost, sustainable solution through local cooperation. No government involved, no huge donor involved, and solutions were found. Yes, I'm finishing that. Then this is Karachi. I'm going to give you the urban example. In the urban example, we have women and water networks, and here you see some of those women. And what did they do? There was an area water partnership. There was water conservation guidelines distributed to 1 million people. And so some of it was done with the water bills, and others were done through these women's groups. And there were many other interventions with that. So there was a mutual accountability protocol. There were certain standard sets of modules. There were documentaries. There were public service announcements. There was a water conservation cell. The local government, which was functional at that time, set up water bill distributors and water inspectors. The idea was not to collect revenue, but to explain to people how they can use water more judiciously. These are just some of the pictures. You can see those millions of them are being attached to water bills. And these are all the other ancillary things. These are all the water inspectors that came about. And last, I want to tell you how women help women and how they set up their own cooperation. So the fashionistas of Karachi, okay, they, for years, have been raising funds to help their sisters in Thar. And there's a huge programs. I mean, you can see all that is happening. It's still going on. And these same fashionistas are one of the biggest fundraisers right now for the floods that are happening. Here you see them all together. And these are all the interventions that they have done together, putting up where water is available. There are the hand pumps, there's solar pumps, there's solar lights, and a lot of other interventions that goes with that. Here they are, the fashionistas and the local women. So we say when women come together, cooperation really happens. So to the ladies in this room, never doubt your power. And this I have borrowed from a gentleman I follow on Twitter. So we need to stop thinking like consumers living in an economy. We need to start thinking like organism living in an ecosystem. I think that's really important. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Simi. Indeed, very interesting, and I think you really drew attention to the role of women, and of course there are also other types of stakeholder groups and groups in society that are really critical to engage with when it comes to water cooperation. I think we've heard throughout the presentations, it's really the benefits coming out of cooperation. I think from the next presenter, Professor Ashok Swain, Uppsala University, Department of Peace and Conflict Research, also leading the ICWC Research School in collaboration with CV. And you have actually done research on the cost of non-cooperation. So I think this is at the other end of looking at the benefits, but what are the actual costs of non-cooperating? Please, Ashok.
Thank you. Thank you for being still here. As you know, we have moved from the Southern Africa to South Asia, but I think I'm not getting into the most interesting part in South Asia. I will be less interesting or a bit boring part. That's India, Pakistan. No, that's India, Pakistan is the interesting part. So I'm missing that. So India, Bangladesh, Nepal, and China. And this is the river basin, understanding the cost of non-cooperation in the Ganges, Brahmaputra, Meghna basin. This is a study which we did this last year and this year for the Oxfam, and it's actually financed by SIDA, Sweden. So the study was to find out what have been the costs of the non-cooperations among the countries, basin countries in the Ganges-Brahmaputra basin. And that actually they forced me to do it on the economic cost. I have been writing on the political cost or supposed to be the political benefits of this cooperation in the basin for a long period of time. And I'm not an economist, but I think when your funder forces you, you get into some things. And I will tell you what are the benefits of it afterwards. This is 5 riparian states, as I mentioned, quite 2 big ones, China and India, and of course, Nepal, Bangladesh, Bhutan. But you need to know that this is the basin which used to be within the control of some sort by India before for a long period of time. And the countries like Nepal, Bhutan, and Bangladesh, India, we used to think that they are under its some kind of we call it big brotherly attitude. But then China was not part of this process for a long period of time. China was not, because it's at the Tibetan side, it was not been developed well that time. So China was not interfering in that water. But China has been actively engaged in this water management for some time now. And that has created a certain kind of changes in how the water cooperation or conflict takes place in that basin. So there is also a competition among between India and China who will be having the say over the matters in Nepal, Bhutan, as well as Bangladesh. These are the areas, if you'll see percentage of the basin, the Ganges, Brahmaputra, and Meghna basin, 64% belongs to India, China 18%, but of course it's quite a huge amount of water comes from the Tibetan plateau, the Nepal, Bangladesh, and Bhutan. What are the challenges in this basin? There is a mismatch between the water demand and supply. This area, particularly the downstream basin, is hugely populated, maximum population, huge poverty. These are also probably the basin has the highest amount of poverty in the world. But also there is an increasing water demand. Several of these countries are also growing economically. Bangladesh has been an economic miracle of some sort for the last several years. So this is going there is a demand for water is increasing for agriculture, for industry, for human consumption, all these things. And even, I mean, India's own government is saying that India is going into a huge scarcity in the next 10 years. So the reports are absolutely devastating if you are really looking at the water issues in that part of the world. Deteriorating water quality. Water quality has not been a major issue in that part of the world. Whenever you look at the previous negotiations, agreements, they haven't taken water quality into account. But water quality, the Ganges River is the most polluted river in the world. Never take a bath. Even if I am a Hindu, I will recommend you not to take a bath in that river. And I will tell you, if you have a time, I will tell you a story, what I went through, because I wanted to get rid of my sin in that river. That didn't work out. Adverse impacts of climate change. The climate change is one of the highly problematic area in the climate-wise. Climate risk is extremely high in that part of the world. Growing stress on food production because of the increasing population growth, increasing economy, demanding more and more food. One of the largest hunger part of the world is in that region, you will find. Lack of sustainable energy supply. Of course, the basin has huge potential for the hydropower. And there is a demand now because of the climate change issues we were trying to, or at least there is a possibility. I'm not sure whether the hydropower is the right answer, but at least there is a diversion toward the hydropower issues, but still it's not going well. Lack of water cooperation agreement among these riparian states. There is no basin-wide cooperations. There have been different attempts. There have been several attempts by the different parties, but it hasn't worked out that at all. As you know, China has never been in a kind of part of this kind of larger basin-wide framework, and India has also always wanted to keep this bilateral framework, so it hasn't worked out anyway. I'm okay with the time? I'm looking at the time master here. There are different sectors. We have looking at how we did this study, because what are the areas the costs have taken place, because as I said, there have been number of writings have been on the political cost. And it is very important, because there is a huge potential of getting the politically peacemaking if the countries to cooperate. But the economic cost had not been really, accounted for in a more constructive manner. So what we are looking at, how the costs have been in water sector, in the food sector, environment sector, and energy sector. I don't want to read it, because you will probably will be, if you need, you can have this. But also the report is available on the internet, and I will give you the link afterwards. The cost of non-cooperation, the water sector. Adverse impact on the flow of regime and the water availability. There is a deteriorating water quality and associated health hazards, loss of life, livelihood due to disasters. This is one of the most flood-prone area as well, drought and flood. Higher transportation cost, because there is a very little transportation. It used to be traditionally very transportation-friendly region, but there has been problems now of various natures, so the transportation has gone down. Untapped hydropower potential, higher energy price and energy insecurity, which is taking place in the food sector. Reduction of agricultural productivity and output, how that has happened because of this, and the reduction in fisheries. There is only one fish which can bring India, Bangladesh together. It's called hilsa. Have you heard of that fish? That is one of the most boniest fish, yes, most boniest fish you will find on the earth. But I think that's the fish which brings these Bengali part of India and Bangladesh is quite friendly together. I mean, so that hasn't really, that is, if there is anyone wants to really invest this, bringing these two countries on fish, that is the fish. Environment and climate sector. Increased environmental stress and degradation of ecosystem, that has not been. Of course, we will see some of the studies have been done on the Sundarban forest. Of course, you know the Sundarbans because of the tigers. But the Sundarbans has also a huge ecosystem, which extremely important. I came originally from that part of the area, so most of it has been gone out now. Adverse impacts of climate change, that is affecting that system there as well, and how that has been. You see, we did a study. We looked at all sorts of research available in all these sectors, and then we found out that really, if you you can't really go on to really calculate this, but if you calculate all the available studies, there is a 14.205 or 14.2 billion annual cost on not cooperating among these rivers, among these river basin countries. 14.2 billion, and for that part of the world is quite important, even if it's not highly significant. And this cooperation I'm talking about not only with in China. For China it may be peanuts, but I think it is on the particularly in the lower part of the basin, India, Bangladesh, Nepal, and Bhutan. And you see, till now I have been screaming about the lack of cooperation and how it has been hugely costly politically for these countries. But when this study came out, it has been covered by all the media all over, this 14.2 billion. And that number matters, because for this, media attention takes place when you give a number. And I think this is an important lesson. As a researcher, we learned that it is important to bring out the economic cost to the forefront, to put it a concrete number for the policymaker and the policy analysts to really realize how much they are losing, because we all think that what are the benefits, probably that is long-term plan. Finally, I don't have time, but I think there is what they can do. It's a secure access to the freshwater resources. It's how they are connected with this. There is a long history of non-cooperation exists there, but there is always, I have been always arguing that it is possible to bring these countries to cooperations, because there is a lot of mutual synergy could be developed. But also, if we forget about everything, because there is a possibility for India to work together, if not China, but at least with Bhutan, Nepal, and Bangladesh, to get into certain kind of power parity on the water issue vis-a-vis China. I will stop here. Thank you.
Many thanks, Ashok. Indeed interesting. And it's really, let's come back to some questions, because I can also see some challenges in putting figures on things and how you calculate that. So I'm sure there can be lots of questions on that. I think now I would like to go over to Honorable Senso Muchunu, Minister of Water and Sanitation, Republic of South Africa. Very proud to have you here, and where we look forward to some reflections on the value of water cooperation and how this has played out in South Africa. I think South Africa is also a very interesting case, I think both nationally and where South Africa has and is having a very progressive water reform. Actually, some years back, one of your predecessors, Mr. Kader Asmal, was awarded the Stockholm Water Prize, actually. So that was very much in the spirit of cooperating on water in the national context. But of course, also for South Africa, they have for decades, they have been working with their neighbors. There is, for example, the Lesotho Highlands project, which is a very particular type of cooperation, and where the country is kind of exporting water to South Africa. I think interestingly, and we heard in Simi's presentation, that land is normally a pathway to water. What's been happening in South Africa is that, this is by law, that they're separating land rights and water rights. So I think this is also a very interesting example on how you try to redistribute water rights among different groups in a society. So maybe we will hear a bit more on this too. Minister, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much to you as Program Director and the other Program Director before you, and nice listening to the presenters, particularly from Africa, on Zamkum, and from the Ministry of Tanzania. Can't hear. Loud. Okay. Well, how is it now? Is it better? Better. Okay. It requires, we're talking about water resources. You require my voice resources. Thank you very much. The story that we want to tell is really the same as the ones that were told by or presented by my fellow Africans, and we do thank this forum and the platform provided to us to relate our stories on water relations or relations between countries forged around water in the region. Indeed, it's a privilege to talk about these transboundaries. In our case, we share a number of basins with neighboring countries, and the rivers affected is the Orange River. Down the line, they call it Sengu, so it's one river, basically Orange River, and then Limpopo in the north, and then Komati a little bit down south, eastern side, and Usu to Pongola, which come together towards the sea to form one basin. And that has a combination of 6 countries down south: Botswana, Eswatini, Lesotho, Mozambique, Namibia, and Zimbabwe. And we all have very functional conventions and agreements with regard to water resources as South Africa. Now, this is mainly around a number of indicators. Part of them were indicated very well by the earlier presenters. First is the shared vision. And I think this coincides very well with the presentation that was made yesterday at the opening by the presenter from the University of Amsterdam. I think it was Professor Gupta, who spoke very well about options around which you can cooperate. And the last one, which was on the 4th column, is the one that we almost all of us prefer. It's a shared vision for water security in the shared river basins, where South Africa has signed water cooperation agreements. It does appear that the issue of sharing, the issue of coming together, cooperating, is the best from all other options, especially those that emanated or developed from the time of colonial periods and up to now, and there have been those changes as a result of realization that it's important that we cooperate. Now, these agreements with all 6 riparian states at river basins organizations, and then you have commissions, and then in some cases you have bilaterals. And this is premised on our common goal for water security, for peace and development, since we all believe that water is an enabler for regional economic intermigration in line with the revised protocol of shared causes. The second pillar or area is national interest demonstrated in our shared basin plans. Each one of these countries have their own national interests, but we bring them together and we share those visions and those common interests of our countries. So each river basin organization has its own action plans, strategic action plans, which are reflecting or reflective of national interest in the case of each of these groups. So you come together, but you're allowed to pursue your own national interest, but in the same framework, from the same framework of cooperation. And the third aspect is the shared investment in terms of infrastructure. This is much more clearer when we talk about South Africa and Lesotho, phase 1 and 2, which we're about to start, abstracting water from the mountains in the Mountain Kingdom and into the Orange River system, which combines with the, to the Vaal River system, which combines with the Orange River system down towards Namibia. It's called Lesotho Highlands Water Project. And in this regard, Lesotho Highlands Water Commission is currently finalizing tenders for an approximation of 20 billion rand for construction of a dam there called Polihadi Dam, which is part of phase 2 of the project. For us, this is a win-win situation because we are able to augment via this phase 2, augment our water resources. Water is a water-scarce country among the top 33, and therefore for us it's a huge benefit in terms of security of water. But for the Lesotho people, they're able to do their, well, first, they also get water, but in the main, electricity and finances for them, and that's very important. Now, the third area is joint management, water resources and infrastructure. Well, the riparian states, Botswana, Mozambique, and Zimbabwe, in the Limpopo River, as we continue to be burdened by invasive species, and therefore we cooperate and deal with this situation. There is active water cooperation through technical task teams in each commission, so that below the commission you have a technical team that does all the details and everything, and make sure that the cooperation is functional, the bilateral is functional. What is key is the fact that there's always political commitment around the ministers when it comes to this. Amongst us, we often meet with Minister of Eswatini, Lesotho, Namibia will be meeting here to further advance processes with regard to the each of these projects and cooperation. Further, we have a high-level binational commissions that support the work of water and sanitation agenda of the 6 countries, even at presidential level, meaning beyond ministers. We also have binational commissions. So it's an umbrella body at presidential level, and then ministers, and then agreements facilitated by technical committees of one kind or the other. And it's working very well, and indeed, it demonstrates that it's very important that we value these cooperations, because I imagine without these cooperations, everyone will be doing whatever project, pulling the other way around, taking any amount of water without due regard for the other people downstream, or vice versa. And therefore, the name of the game is cooperation. The name of the game is sharing the values of water in a framework with rules and regulations that demonstrate a win-win kind of situation. And so by and large, we share the same with our northern neighbors in our continent. Thank you very much for your attention.
Minister, thank you very much. And I think you very much hit a few nails there directly. I think this has been coming out quite strongly also in the other presentations. And what is it that makes cooperation work, actually? And I think it was mentioned here. So it's really about joint vision. So I think that's, of course, the starting point. There are more elements to make cooperation happen at the very end, of course. But I think this is probably one very strong element when it comes to cooperation. But I think with that, let's take up our panelists up here and let's engage a bit with the audience. I'm sure you are very much eager to pose some questions and probe into the heads of these excellent presenters a bit more. Also, Minister, if you would like to join us too. Maybe we can, yeah, we can share. Yeah, perfect. Let's see. This is the mic we have, right? So, yeah, we also take some questions from the audience. Yeah. Okay, let's take some questions. Yeah, so we have over here. Let's take some 2-3 questions here and then over here.
Thank you very much. My name is Tom Dyer from Antea Group in Belgium. I've been working in several projects with international multilateral organizations in several countries in Africa. Thank you very much for the good examples and the good messages. I have a question which is maybe slightly out of the scope because I had a feeling we've mostly been talking about cooperation between countries, cooperation between national governments and local governments, maybe communities. But what I came aware of this week, the last 2 days, I was mostly in sessions on water stewardship with corporates who've done own Procter & Gamble, Coca-Cola company and the likes, who have been doing a lot on water stewardship at their own premises and water efficiency, but also going more and more into actions at landscape level, where I have the feeling they're maybe entering into the space which is normally occupied by government. And I haven't been hearing a lot talking to them about cooperation with government. So I was wondering from your side, for example, one of the cases that I heard even coming back 2 times was in the Drakensbergen, where some of these companies do quite a lot of activities. I was wondering from your side how you look at that cooperation.
Thanks a lot. Yeah, we down there. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you. In listening to the presentations from Asia, South Asia, and the presentation from Africa, what was very obvious to me is some very glaring examples of possible areas of cooperation. I know we are focusing on the presentations are largely very regional, but I wonder whether there is much cooperation that is taking place between Asia and Africa, because I have seen that there are areas that can be pursued, number one. And then number two, just an observation in passing, that I noticed that there is a lot that is taking place in all these river basins in terms of mainstreaming gender in the operations of river basin organizations. But I noticed that in the presentation, very little has come out, with the exception of the presentation of Siwi. We may just want to make sure that in future, the gender dimension is not just left as a side activity to be pursued by women, but is actually mainstreamed in presentations, so that it's an integral aspect of river basin organization management. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Let's start with these 2 questions. I think first one, it's very much about private sector and how that plays out, water stewardship and how that plays out when it comes to water cooperation. And as we know it, of course, that the private sector is the big water user, of course, and different parts of the sector. Minister?
Well, we were being disciplined, focusing on what we were called here to talk about. But we can clearly give evidence of not only the need to cooperate with the private sector, but demonstrated in action in our case in South Africa. We have seen space, a lot of space for private sector role in water and sanitation. This is very much because of backlogs, huge backlogs that you have in water provision, and even in terms of water balance, demand and supply. But as I say, gap in terms of deficit going forward, but also because of smaller budgets, relatively smaller budgets vis-a-vis what needs to be done right now, not some 20 years to come or 15 years to go. So we've clearly seen and realized and accepted. And therefore, there are a number of agreements that we already have with the mining sector in particular and other businesses. And we're even now bringing the financial sector into play as far as this is concerned. So I guess you have interest. We can pursue that in the passage. If you want to invest, you are very much welcome. But there is certainly a role of the private sector in providing water in South Africa. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I was just going to ask you, how do you work with this in SAMCOM? Would there be, actually, when you have some of your meetings, would private sector be represented in one way or the other?
Thank you for that question. In SAMCOM, the way we've been going about is integrating, the public and the private through what I call the national stakeholder committees. This is where everybody comes in. And now what has been happening is in our reconfiguration, so that, these national steering committees are able to influence the implementation of the climate investment initiative that we are actually developing, is reconfiguring on how this could be actually be more effective. And we've started with Zambia and Botswana. What they decided within their own borders was that, local government was more effective in bringing everybody together. And what we found is, when local government is actually chairing and driving, these committees, when they issue a directive for a meeting, everybody leaves whatever they are doing and they attend those meetings. Because with local government, it's more like a directive from the president of the country. So we are finding that, even in Mozambique, the big sugar producers, they are part of the ARA Centro, the steering committee. Same as in Zambia, Coca-Cola, Lafarge, the cement producers, they are now part of that. So this is the way we've decided to go about it in the Zambezi. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for explaining this. How about Tanzania?
Thank you very much. Also in Tanzania, we are involving these private sectors. We are managing our water resources at the local level. We have water use associations. So these private sectors who are the big users of water, they're also part of those water use associations.
Over here to the Asian side, let's leave this question for the moment. And I was actually thinking, what can Asia learn from Africa and vice versa?
Okay. First thing is that we in Pakistan have learned a lot from South Africa. Okay, your water policy has been fantastic. When some of the citizens of Pakistan worked on a citizens policy to inform our government, we looked at the South African water policy. And we've had a lot of people from South African water sector visiting us and helping us out. Of course, after doing all of that, the water policy that our government actually produced was nothing close to what we could have learned from South Africa. And Mercy, for your information, it mentioned women only once, and it only as beneficiaries of some projects. So I think there isn't enough South-South cooperation, and I think we need to do that. I mean, within South Asia, we don't cooperate, for God's sakes. We do it all through dialogues, and SARC is not functional. So there are huge issues there. but I think we can learn a lot from experiences. And I think that Africa can also learn from some of the things not to do and also some of the things to do. For example, the Indus Waters Treaty is a good example. And even though people now say, oh, that time is gone in climate change, I believe that we need to do new treaties. We shouldn't touch that one. Something that works should be left alone. But I'd like to take up in 2 minutes the two questions which came up. You know, getting the corporates to help out is a double-edged sword, okay? So we have to be really careful. Yes, the corporate sector should be helping, and they've done great things, like Rotary has really helped eradicate polio. Okay, and Rotary is made up of members of people from corporate sector, basically from the haves to the have-nots, and that's an example that has worked. But otherwise, right now, we have 80 big billionaires, and they're dictating what's happening to the whole world, and that's not on. And they believe that they know it all, which they don't. And also, fossil fuel companies like to do all the stewardship because it gives them a cleaner image. But the thing they have to do is to keep fossil fuels in the ground and switch to, I'm sure they can make as much money by switching to renewables. So I think we have to be careful. But yes, we work with the corporate sector. I think local, within country, national corporate sector is not that involved. And I think we need to draw them out a lot more. And in terms of getting women involved, I, for one, and Mercy and I have worked together in our GWP days. We believe that women should not be seen only as beneficiaries. We are fed up of being told that they have to clean the toilets and they have to carry water and all of that. We want women on the decision-making boards. We want them as ministers, and that has been happening recently. Here's an example of I was asking her how many women are involved in the water ministry. In my country, hardly any. Okay, and there is great resistance to having, but in South Africa, we've learned how well they have worked on that. So there's a lot to learn, and in terms of getting women on decision-making boards, whether they are of corporate sector, whether they are NGOs, or whether they're international NGOs, or they are ministries and governments, I think there's a lot still needs to be done. Thank you.
In assessing the cost of non-cooperation, how did you try to take into account the, let's say, like the exclusion of certain types of actors, for example, be it the role of women? It could, of course, also be other groups in society. And was that something that was looked at?
No, I mean, there are many things which would be added. As I said, there is a larger areas of costs, which has not been, you cannot put a money or the figure into it. So that has been the problem. And that's why I was reluctant to do this, putting a cost means it was only 14.2 billion. It's, if you calculate the other cost and benefits, it will be huge. And that's what you can't really put a figure into it. And that's why we have been, but what I said, there is some benefits to it by calculating the cost, but there is a larger benefits within it, which we really leave out. But you want me to only answer your question, or can I answer a little? Okay, thank you. Very quickly, the private sector, which we looked at it, and I agree there is a huge role private sector has to play, but the private sectors in the areas where we are doing this study is actually, they are not really how you will put, because take for example, particularly in Nepal, where we are looking at the private sector role in hydropower productions. And the one private sector is the Chinese company. They are very closely connected with the Chinese government, whereas the Indian companies, they are not closely connected with the Indian government, but they are cronies of Indian leaders. So I think it's always a very difficult, if they are not really private, how to really create a private part to it. Sorry, that's not the, wait, you know what I mean. But I think going back to the South-South cooperation, it's an area which has been underdeveloped, undermined by our, I mean, now I'm talking as a Swede, I mean, undermined by our part of the world here. Because I think it's very important when we go as a researcher, we try to bring out, hey, this is what has happened in Rhine. This is what happened, we made differences in the European Framework Directive. Or this is what we have done in the Columbia River Basin. Or this is what we have done in the, what you call the Colorado River Basin. But we don't take the good stories from the South. I think there has been some attempts, like take for example, the Nile River Basin Initiative people were taken to the Mekong River Commission to study. Of course, I don't know how much that really helped it, but at least they went there. But there has been a number of cases where it works. Of course, the Indus, I was trying to avoid the Pakistan, India, but let's talk about Indus. Indus 1960, the agreement has worked.
In 2 sentences.
I'm going to half sentence. The 1960 Indus Water Agreement was a fantastic agreement. But the question is, does it really do its job? But I think it's important, it has done quite a lot of job, but it needed to be seen that how that treaty, despite these 2 countries' relationship, we all know, it has survived 3 wars. And I think that's why we need to work together, get this kind of information, get kind of examples from the cases that we think are impossible to carry out in other parts of the world. So I think there is a huge area of this.
Thanks a lot. Actually, we have to close. We're running out of time. Also, my colleague Mats will close by not really trying to summarize. Before Mats enters here, let's give a big hand to the presenters and excellent presentations. Mats.
Thank you, Håkan. And well, it's my task to close this session for today, and it's been extremely rich, I think. I'd like to give a very, very big thank to all the presenters. It's been an excellent series of examples from 2 continents of this planet. Very, very nice. And I think the one keyword that is coming through all the time is challenges and opportunities. All of you have presented a series of challenges, but also a long line of opportunities. And I think that's very positive, because what you've shown is that cooperation actually do happens in all these scales. So I take away a very positive message from all of you in this context. Challenges can be met by looking at the opportunities. And I think that Tumaini put it straightforward, that benefits actually outnumbers challenges. And she even said that we need to quantify these benefits so that we know what we're talking about. And that's very good to actually convince those that are in doubt whether cooperation actually do benefit something or not. But benefits outnumbers challenges. There's few mismatches also between different scales here. Well, one mismatch of the session was covered by a question that the private sector is also playing a very important role. But another mismatch that I myself have encountered a lot is with central level of governance and local level of governance. And that's something that we really need to work with, I think, all over the world in different areas, different countries, and different regions and different sectors. Particularly when we look at the water, and particularly when we look at climate change impact on water resources, the mismatch is really profound. And Simi showed very nicely how that mismatch can be covered to some extent with the local initiatives, community helping other communities on the local scale, and that's where the real things are happening. So we just need to connect those that have the decision and the power to support those activities and where the knowledge is. So we have a lot of win-win situations here on different scales and cross horizontal. So I think that's what we want to take with us today. So thank you very much to presenters, and thank you to the audience for being with us today. We look forward to see you again. Thank you.